Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're heading right into the heart of Africa. Picture this, right where the Great Rift Valley meets the African Great Lakes, there's a nation called Burundi. According to decades of analysis from global institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, Burundi consistently ranks as the poorest economy in the entire world. It's home to about 12.5 million people who are engaged in a daily, intense struggle for just the basic necessities. And because of that, it's also frequently described as the world's unhappiest country.
To really grasp what's going on here, we've got to talk about the money. Just imagine pouring your absolute blood, sweat, and tears into a job all year round. And your reward for all that? A grand total of $180? Yep, you heard that right. $180. That is the average annual income for a working citizen in Burundi. We really need to set this macroeconomic baseline right out of the gate because honestly, it frames literally everything else we're going to explore today.
Okay, let's dive into this. To put that number into perspective, let's look at this staggering comparison. An average Burundian would have to work for roughly 230 years, and I mean without spending a single penny of that income, just to equal one single year of an average United States' salary. I mean, wow. It's a massive mathematical chasm, and it strictly dictates the everyday survival boundaries for millions of people.
So let's move into Section 1, the extreme economic reality. We just looked at the massive macro numbers, right? But what does that actually look like when a family just needs to step out their door and buy groceries? Well, it's basically impossible math. Let's say you're a lucky worker who actually has a steady job. You might pull in about 50,000 Burundian francs a month. That's about 15 US dollars. Now, if you're trying to feed a typical family of 8 on that, the math just breaks down completely. A single liter of sunflower oil, 9,000 francs. A kilo of sugar is 8,500. A liter of milk is 5,500. If you buy just those 3 basic pantry items, boom, half your entire monthly income is gone. It leaves virtually nothing for rent, let alone vegetables, meat, or clothes. Because the actual money system is so broken and out of reach for the average citizen, a lot of folks have just completely ditched the concept of cash. Instead, they rely heavily on a barter economy. Especially out in the rural areas, which, by the way, make up 86% of the whole country, people literally don't carry money or even know current exchange rates. They just continuously grow their crops, mostly corn and beans, and trade them directly with their neighbors just so they can eat. They aren't trying to build wealth, they're just trying to secure their next meal.
Which brings us to Section 2, the grueling hustle of daily life.
In an economy where money barely works, raw human muscle has to step in to make up the difference. The bicycle transporters are a perfect and honestly grueling example of this physical toll. If you own a bike here, you've got a profession, but it is an incredibly dangerous one. These guys will load up a standard bike frame with up to 200 kilograms, that's over 400 pounds, of stuff like bananas or charcoal. Then, often completely barefoot, they trek 100 to 150 kilometers across provinces. And here's the craziest part. When they go down these steep mountain roads, all that weight pushes them to speeds of 70 to 80 kilometers an hour. They have to squeeze the manual handbrakes for dear life. A blown tire or failed brake in traffic is often fatal. And for a brutal 10 to 12-hour day of taking on this extreme physical risk, they earn roughly 90 cents.
And here's the kicker. That 90 cents a day is actually a highly sought-after wage. To really put a human face to these statistics, consider a 58-year-old farmer named John. He plants beans and tries to support a family of 10 on a total revenue of just $10 a month. $10. All 10 family members sleep on the dirt floor in a single room, sharing just a few blankets made from discarded materials. Yet, incredibly, John's situation is considered relatively stable compared to folks who don't have any shelter at all. And just like John's family, the vast majority of the country lives entirely off the grid. Only 7.6% of the entire population actually has access to electricity. Sure, you might find a neighborhood phone charging point, but when the sun goes down, most homes are pitched into total darkness. This means no refrigeration to keep food fresh, no electric machinery to process crops, and an absolute reliance on physical daylight just to be productive. So the crucial point here is that this intense individual hustle is constantly crashing into massive systemic hurdles. Transporting crops is an absolute nightmare because out of 12,000 kilometers of roads, only 14% are actually paved with asphalt. The rest just turn to deep, impassable mud in the rain. Then there's healthcare, which is incredibly sparse. We're talking one doctor for every 35,000 people. 2 million people living in Burundi have literally never been to a hospital. And because daily meat consumption is just 14 grams per person, there's this severe lack of protein, iron, and zinc, leading to stunted physical and cognitive growth. Tragically, 1 in 20 people will die from malnutrition or starvation. All of this drags the average life expectancy down to just 49 years. It's just devastating.
Moving on to Section 3, Health, Demographics, and History.
To truly grasp the reality of Burundi today, we really have to look at who makes up this population right now and the historical forces that shaped their world. And this brilliantly illustrates the situation. Because of that low life expectancy combined with a very high birth rate, averaging 5.5 kids per woman, the population skews unbelievably young. 45% of the population is under the age of 15. Let that sink in. A staggering 65% are under 25. Meanwhile, a tiny 3% make it to 65 or older. So you've got this incredibly young, highly vulnerable society trying to lift up an entire nation, but without a large foundation of older, experienced workers.
But how did the infrastructure and societal framework get to this point? Well, a massive piece of the answer lies in foreign colonization. There's a famous African proverb that I think perfectly hits the nail on the head regarding the historical extraction of resources from the continent. When the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. Let's pray, we close our eyes. When we open them, we had the Bible and they had the land. Let's trace the direct impact of that colonial era. Back in 1890, the Kingdom of Burundi got swallowed up into German East Africa. Then, after World War I, it was handed over to Belgian rule. The Belgian administration deeply impacted the culture. They brought in the French language and educational systems that are actually still copied today. But then, in 1933, they did something that changed everything. They introduced ethnic identity cards. They essentially categorized the population based on physical characteristics, artificially creating these super rigid social classes. Even after Burundi officially declared its independence in 1962, the toxic legacy of those mandatory ID cards sparked decades of devastating conflict. This turbulence dragged on all the way until 2005, and it claimed the lives of roughly 300,000 people. And the fallout from all that conflict, combined with extreme economic instability and health crises like AIDS, has left a truly heartbreaking legacy. An estimated 5% of the total population, which is 610,000 children, are orphans. Without a reliable safety net, so many of these kids are pushed onto the streets or into dangerous labor. Objective reports from the U.S. State Department actually note severe issues of trafficking here, detailing instances where vulnerable children are sold in regional markets for forced agricultural work for as little as $15. Yet standing in incredibly stark contrast to this extreme poverty and hardship is an absolute goldmine of natural resources. Right along Burundi's borders sits Lake Tanganyika. It's the second deepest lake in the world, and astoundingly, it holds roughly 16% of the entire world's freshwater reserve. 16%. While fishermen are currently out there navigating its waters in primitive, leaky wooden boats, literally dodging massive crocodiles, it represents this immense, largely untapped resource just sitting right next to incredible scarcity. But despite the overwhelming statistics, the lack of electricity, and the systemic hurdles we've explored, the people of Burundi display this profound, enduring resilience. You hear it right in their national motto: unity, work, and development. You see it on Saturdays when citizens actually participate in public city cleaning days to maintain their communities. You see it on Sundays, where 84% of the population being Christian means huge, vibrant church services filled with traditional music and dance. And you absolutely see it in the youth, who still dream big, whether it's finishing their education or being scouted for international football clubs. Despite all the desperation, hope and humanity absolutely persist here.
Which brings us to our final thought to close out this explainer. Looking at the day-to-day reality on the ground in Burundi, ask yourself, what does it actually take to survive and even find hope in a reality where basic survival is mathematically impossible? It's a question that forces us to reflect deeply on our own economic realities, the conveniences we totally take for granted, and the unbreakable spirit of the Burundian people. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep exploring the world around you.